Hi, Dr. Farmer. Thank you for having me. So good to see you.
I'm so glad to have the opportunity to interview you today.
Thank you.
I would like to talk with you about Barbara Love's Liberatory Consciousness Framework. As you know, we at the School of Social Work have started to use Dr. Barbara Love's Liberatory Consciousness Framework in our curriculum and in the field settings. And I know that you are one of the individuals who is also a member of the school's inclusion, intersectionality, diversity, equity, and advancement committee. And I thank you for serving on that committee. And so today I would like to hear from you how you have used the Liberatory Consciousness Framework in your classes as well as the field setting. But before you talk about that, I would like to know what classes have you been in that have talked about the Liberatory Consciousness Framework?
Sure. So I can start off just by introducing myself. Thank you for that brief introduction. So my name is Valentina Gil. I'm a social work master's in social work student here at Rutgers University, and I'm obtaining my specialization in management and policy with an area of emphasis in global social work. I also want to acknowledge my Colombian ancestry and acknowledge that we're on Lenape land. So I first found out about liberatory consciousness back in the BSW program, and I absolutely fell in love with this idea of liberation and how that can be translated into all social work settings and all populations. So in my classes, it's something that comes up, first day we're there, we talk about the syllabus, and it's something that has been very integrated into the curriculum, which I appreciate. And I guess one of the ways that we've been able to use it, or in some of the classes that I've been able to use it, is the first one I can think of is social work with Latinos, and also management practice and theory, which is a macro level course. So those are the two courses that I've been able to use it in so far.
Okay, could you go in greater detail about how were you able to use the Liberatory Consciousness Framework? Were you
Yeah.
able to apply it to a specific class assignment?
Yes, so I can start with talking about management practice and theory by Professor Candelario. So for one of our assignments, we had a case study, and it was based on a population called Diversity Village, and they needed sort of like a framework or a structure that would develop a program, like a social work program or an intervention that would help meet the needs of this population. And this village, or this case study scenario, had a lot of different needs in the community. There was domestic violence. A large percent of the population was people of color, and there was violence, drugs, anything you can think of. So we had to create this program to kind of meet the needs of the residents of this community. And I decided to integrate the use of the Liberatory Consciousness Framework to sort of develop my program and my intervention. So what I came up with was something called the Diversity Village Collaborative Center. And my mission statement for the center was to help liberate individuals and families from personal, familial, and structural limitations by providing them with access to resources that better the quality of life and strengthen community building. And so the vision of the agency was to promote radical transformation for community members through self-development and collaboration towards diversity and justice, which is very similar to what we talk about here on the IDEA Committee and at the School of Social Work in general. So more in detail, the community liberation program that I created, an example of the intervention was a biweekly session for all community members to engage in a variety of discussions about race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disabilities, healthy relationships, and other pressing community issues. So an example of an issue that the population was experiencing was the sexual assault of a lesbian university student and a murder-suicide in an immigrant family. So these trainings, workshops, and conversations in these biweekly sessions would focus on developing skills to engage in productive conversations around social justice. And it would teach community members to have active listening, suspending judgment, and leaning into discomfort so that they can become politically engaged, informed meet with local government, go to town hall meetings, or even organize protests to reimagine and transform community oppression.
And again, my understanding of the liberatory consciousness framework is that it has these 4 A's: an awareness, where we are aware that there is oppression in society, and there is analysis, where we analyze why oppression is occurring, and there's this action that we take to address that oppression, and there's accountability and allyship, where I may partner with others to engage in such actions. So going through your assignment, could you describe how you use all those 4 A's to
Yeah.
come up with your intervention?
So, like you said, the first step is always awareness. So, reading through the particular struggles that the community members were experiencing, like I said, domestic violence, assault, even a murder suicide, these are very serious things that we have to then take into account and then analyze. So, the way that I analyzed the situation was choosing this particular framework and then looking at ways, direct interventions and evidence-based practices in community or meso level scenarios where we could help people overcome and liberate themselves from their struggles. So that was awareness, analysis, and then accountability. The assignment didn't really, take, it's just a scenario, right? So I guess one way we could do that was through program evaluation and seeing how are clients actually going through all of the steps of the program and actually receiving help for their struggles and their limitations. So that would be one way that you could practice accountability and allyship as well.
Well, thanks for letting me know how you applied those 4 A's to that particular assignment. And I mentioned earlier that students are also learning how to apply the liberatory consciousness framework in their field settings. So could you tell me about your field setting for this year and how you applied the liberatory consciousness framework in your field setting?
Of course. So this year I had the pleasure to be with the state, the New Jersey Department of Human Services, in the Office of Research and Evaluation. So a lot of what I was doing was research and sort of consulting with different government agencies to help meet their needs and provide like tables and graphs and very macro level work so that we can justify funding for programs and things like that. And so one of the examples that I can think of is there was this grant during the pandemic that helped bring crisis counseling services to New Jerseyans in need. And so what I did was sort of analyze the data for a marginalized community. So the particular community that I chose to analyze was Hispanics. So I analyzed this data, right? First, I had the awareness. Historically, we've been underrepresented and marginalized. Even now, we're not fully represented on the census. So I had the awareness of this and I chose to analyze this population through data. So I used SPSS, chose a set of variables, went through the statistical analysis, realized actually that because of the pandemic, Hispanics weren't receiving as many services as the other populations were. So that was an area of concern. And then in terms of accountability and allyship, I was able to write up a report and justify why the Hispanic population might need more funding and resources that would help alleviate some of the crisis, especially that was going on surrounding the time of the pandemic. So that was one example of how I used liberatory consciousness in my internship.
That's great. And I'm great that you were able to use that in your internship. Can you
Yes.
provide me with any other examples of how you use the liberatory consciousness framework?
I think it's really more so about a state of being and something that you have to come to embody. The last example I can think of, I was in New York City actually for a networking event, and there was someone that was very clearly under some sort of substance, and they seemed to be unhoused. And there were people just actively belittling this person and sort of degrading them for the way that they were presenting or carrying themselves. And I think even though in those situations where you're a so-called bystander, taking awareness of the situation and taking action and maybe even calling people out and saying, hey, that's not an acceptable behavior. They're just human beings just like anyone else. And it's not really your place to say that. So being able to just call people out, I think, in a respectful tone, of course, but acknowledging oppression when we see it and taking action and accountability for our actions as a whole, as a collective and an individual.
Well, thank you so much for letting me know how you can use the liberatory consciousness framework in situations that occur in real life. I think that's important for students to know that the liberatory consciousness framework is not just a framework that's just going to be applied in your classroom with your assignments, but really it's like you said, it's a way of thinking that can be applied to other situations that we may encounter.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you so much, Dr. Farmer.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today to
Yeah.
talk about how the liberatory consciousness framework has been applied in the courses you have taken, in your assignments, and in your field setting where you're doing your placement.
Yes, it's an honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.